Okay, I need a motion to come out of executive session. Bill Donald, and second, Mr. Bourgeois. And also, if I can have a motion to approve moving forward with the suit as necessary and needed, and continue to work with the Corps and the JV to resolve issues to the satisfaction of CPRA, CPRA Board, and levy authority. Do you have a motion? Motion by Bill Donald, second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And we have public comment. We do have a card here. Let me see if I can find it. Chris Mancuso. Mancuso. PRCP. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Dove, and members of the authority. Good to see many of you. My name is Chris Macaluso. I'm from Baton Rouge. I am the Marine Fisheries Director for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. I want to spend a few minutes today talking about the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion. I know it's been in the news a great deal. It's been pretty hotly debated at legislative committees over the last month. I really want to focus on the critical need for the project to move forward quickly with a focus on fisheries. I have fished coastal Louisiana from one end to the other, pretty much every coastal basin, most of our coastal swamps. Primarily, I spend my time these days fishing both the Barataria Basin and the Pontchartrain Basin and the Breton Basins. The land loss and habitat loss in the Barataria Basin is so extensive at this point, it's hard to describe. And while it's certain to cause some short-term seasonal displacement of fisheries and shift oyster production westward, in the long run, I think reconnecting a river to the basin is the best option, really the only option for fisheries production and sustained cultural and economic activity supported by recreational fishing and several commercial fisheries, including crabs and white shrimp. I want to cite a 2002 paper produced by LSU Sea Grant regarding fisheries production and diversions. A quote, "The breakup of vegetated marsh causes a short-term increase in the ingress routes and edge habitats so vital for juvenile estuarine fish. Yet this sort of productivity may be short-lived. Indeed, geologic simulations indicate that Louisiana's coastal land-water interface has recently begun to decline. This loss of habitat does not bode well for future fisheries production. Further complicating the paradox of levees and landings is the inland migration of fisheries and fishermen. As Louisiana's coastal landscape has retreated, areas of marsh once classified as predominantly fresh and intermediate have transformed to brackish and saline. Many brackish saline marshes have been completely converted to open water." The paper further states, additionally, there is some indication that deterioration is replacing alluviation as the main driver of fisheries productivity, a recipe for eventual collapse of fisheries production. This paper was written more than 20 years ago. I spoke with one of the authors of that paper in the last 2 weeks, a biologist named Mark Scheck-Snyder, who's now retired from the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. He told me he believed that if some effort to reconnect the river to the Barataria Basin was not made in the next decade, redfish limits would have to be reduced again. This summer, they are likely to go from 5 fish to 4 fish. A few months after Hurricane Ida, I spoke with fisheries biologists at both CPRA and Wildlife and Fisheries about the impacts of the storm. Shortly thereafter, I wrote a story for Louisiana Sportsman's Magazine. Chris Sheebley, a marine fisheries biologist with Louisiana's Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, said, and was quoted in the article, "It's the organic materials and rotting vegetation called detritus that feeds the food chain in areas that don't get a lot of sediment and freshwater input from the river. Areas where fresh and saltwater mix east of the river and near the Atchafalaya River, the food chain starts with phytoplankton, but in organic soils, the ones that look like coffee grounds, it's the nutrient leaching out of the soil that makes up the base, feeds the forage, and ultimately predators like speckled trout and redfish." He went on to say that the loss of marsh and organic materials will inevitably lead to a decline in fisheries production as nutrient levels drop and vital nursery grounds for juvenile shrimp, crab, and mullet and other forage is lost. In talking about all of the areas of the Barataria Basin that have converted to open water, Sheebley said, "We may already be at the tipping point of collapse in the Barataria Basin." I can appreciate that the discussion of Mid-Barataria has become political. There's no way to avoid that discussion. I'm also very, very much aware, and have been in the middle of several of these conversations, about the negative impacts to fisheries. There is no doubt there will be a loss of oyster production in eastern Barataria Bay. I also believe there is potential for increased production in western Barataria Bay once the diversion becomes operational. What has been largely left out of these discussions, though, is how essential this project is for the future of redfish and speckled trout in our state. We don't have a redfish problem statewide. The Mississippi River is at over 11 feet right now in New Orleans, and there are reports of redfish catches better than anyone has seen in decades east of the river. Where we have a production problem is in the Barataria and Timberlake basins, and it's because of the profound habitat loss that they've experienced. Thank you, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mancuso, and we have a motion to adjourn. Tony Alford, second. Second, President Joe. Thank you very much. Great meeting, everyone. Thank you.